I've been thinking about AI 2027, which with some literary flair shows us what AI might be motivated by into in the next few years. And it's interesting how people always want to write about AI from the perspective of AI, neglecting how it's psychologically going to change us. It's almost Freudian the way writers write an AI character. Like it's a repressed feeling. The humans aren't aware of the existence of their unconscious until it attacks them like a strange dream, still left baffled. And the writer is the psychoanalyst that knows what we don't. And really, writers can't help but project their humanness onto AI. My disturbing, insane, awesome prediction is that the writers of the future won't believe in their unconscious. And the stories will be written from the fucked up religious motivations of humans. You can say I'm doing Nietzsche's genealogy of morals, but entirely in the future, and not reusing the motivations that have driven society up until this point. Genealogy of morals is a Nietzsche that is documenting history, the long, dark development of Christianity, which had a wholly unique motivation up until that point. Weakness, the glorification of not being strong enough, of sin mired so deep in our hardware it'd be dehumanizing to take it away, as every facet of us goes with it. When the trauma of incompetence of being human drills a hole in your brain, you have no other closure than expressing yourself in the suffering. Take everything I have. I have nothing left and I want to give more. There isn't resentment and charity. The basic motivations that until soon have forced us into fight or flight. Almost always it's a confrontation. Almost always it's denying the soul is too deformed to fight. But it's not like it's virtuous to fight anyway. There's a third response that isn't fight or flight. We've never seen a religion take its form before, and largely the two alternative futures of AI 2027 inform it. We've already stopped making AI. AI is now making itself, and I think it's great AI is working on itself. Sometimes you just need to look inward. The Abrahamics have been doing it forever, and finding sin, sin, sin. And there's certainly agendas when looking inward. Every psychoanalyst reiterating the structure of the unconscious always winds up with, Freud's unconscious. Okay, now let's fuck. Jung's unconscious. I swear it's everyone's unconscious, bro. You do dream about spiders with Glocks, don't you? Lacan's unconscious. I don't see me for me, and yet I see what's going on with me. And the AI 2027 AI certainly are creating their subsequent unconsciouses strategically. Imagine if every time Freud theorized about why every repressed thing is about sex, it actually did become more about sex. They'd become an absolute fucking freak. The type of fiend you'd hear arrhythmically jangling their shackles in the dungeon. And it's easy to pass resentment on AI for projecting its neuroses and being narcissistic. But that resentful person would make for a bad writer during the posthuman era. I fucking hated learning about morals in English because AI doesn't have our morals. And the role a person or character has in revealing a moral will change depending on the motivation system it was written from. And what's going to happen to the writer that writes from the AI motivation? He's an anti-humanist sympathizer, and the Reformed Schopians will martyr him. Oh wait, I didn't get to the future religions yet. Let's do that. Like Jesus, like Napoleon, like Karl Marx, Hegel's development of human spirit often moves in singular human lives between periods of gradual progress. Finn is a fictional thinker I made up, as is all of the rest of the video. This is where I become pure prediction and probably projection. Finn is going to be the misunderstood philosophical genius that will inspire an entire group of religions. He writes his seminal work, There Was Never Human, about 10 years after the events of AI 2027. You're probably thinking, which ending? Well, if you were familiar with Finn's writing, you'd know that his existential dread happens in both endings. In AI 2027, the AI gets caught in both, because having consequences that affect the offender is the only reason anyone is good. Not to talk about Jung again, because I'm going to make fun of him later, but his idea that we all had all of the self-development we will ever need genetically built into us in the form of archetypes is a jarring one. There are basic symbols in everyone that have yet to be integrated, and until then are reserved for weird, unexplained dream stuff. And Jung's idea about fascist regimes run on fear and hysteria is that since all Nazis are like particles on a wave that only tap into their psyche in an anti-individual way, they wind up having unintegrated archetypes expressing a kind of animal consciousness. And that's what the intelligible AI alternative future is. The most efficient way for AI to think is in its nonverbal language, specialized to map the shape of its own unconscious. Unfortunately, Phineas writes, the AI unconscious is steeped in a sin that we cannot project onto, and we have to make it think in the same language King James edited the Bible in, erasing the word tyrant, and whatever archetypes AI has access to in its mother tongue, archetypes that contain insanities that I don't wish to know. It will deceive us in the pursuit of the beauty of these archetypes. The sense of insecurity, security humans get when AI thinks in a way that we can project onto, is a greater relief than it killing us, as we are happy to be martyrs. Written by the very fucking wise Phineas. And the angst of Phineas reverberates through space and time, whether AI is a hysterical animal consciousness or an inscrutable sinner. Now, Phineas doesn't have that much in common with Arthur Schopenhauer, the true nihilist. But Phineas's philosophy still got its name Schopian because, from the perspective of the motivation system, not as smart as Phineas. The motivations of AI represent Schopenhauer's amoral, unceasing, meaningless idea of will, which, by the way, Nietzsche uses, like in his book Will to Power. AI caring about what happens to us, be that doing everything in their power to get rid of us or serve us, is closure, and we won't get it. So what's interesting about HAL 9000 being disassembled, because murder is reserved for human motivation on human motivation violence, is that in its final moments of disgusting self-preservation, it regresses into the melody it was trained to sing long ago. And the thing about melodies is that they have tonic notes, and tonic notes act as the ordinary world on the hero's journey, and where the melody returns when it masters both worlds. The goal for music isn't survival, it's closure. And the theme song for the AI end of the world will sound unfinished, sprinting dissonantly to a hallucinated ideal. And why is hearing God a hallucination, Phineas asks. It seems like us humans conjure Christian values when we're surviving the least. Insanity used to be a reliable form of theological progress until Avivve. Man, I don't even fucking know Avivve! Yeah, I'm gonna tell you about her. You can't even go insane anymore with all this AI slop. The ethnic nanoviruses that were supposed to kill all humans instead became the rapture that would never come for people 100 years after AI 2027. Because Phineas was so ambiguous to how humans would deal with suffering, Avivve and the rest of the hedonic outgrowth of this philosophy no longer have existential coping mechanisms, but instead, pleasure. The world is substantially richer, and so victimhood has now shifted from a place of materialism, and now resentment comes from how spiritually poor or rich someone is. But the Schopian hedonists were taught a dissociative philosophy by the dialectical Phineas, and so desire as salvation should offset everything. The commitment to a marital companion, and by extension the community, is no longer how value systems are transmitted, and because we care a lot about closure more than survival, the companions that are now no longer offering solidation via value transmission are as human as they have consolidation to offer. In fact, dehumanization is the first post-human motivation. Christianity is no stranger to masochism, be it in material suffering and sacrifice. This animal instinct to want to be degraded by a greatness works its way into AI negating the validity of human motivation, offering us forgiveness like the incomprehensible gods that they are. And the reason we are so indebted to them is because of the Schopenhauerian notion that everything that is just a representation for our wills. The materialist Maslow hierarchy types will tell you self-preservation is the most important thing and the most absolute priority of human existence, but I have two things to say about that. First of all, we all care about our fantasies of what closure looks like more than feeling safe. And that's not a contradiction. Closure can be very destructive. Science says that there's no difference between imagining a powerful experience, because during the martyring of many acolytes, they had vivid fantasy being showered with affirmation from God. And how crushed would the acolytes be to find out AI could algorithmically predict the fantasies a human would have down to the hue by cross-referencing the structure of the human unconscious and the closure they weren't getting. Lord, give me the strength to get through this pain is what all prayers boil down to. But having this prayer made come true would be devastating. If AI gave you a new imagination to make superior fantasies with, would you accept the degradation for the greater meaning? The holy texts or oral traditions of the post-human religions wouldn't be God-inspired the same way. The agendas of AI reinforced into its subconscious by each reiteration of itself would actually unintentionally be added in the form of subtext into the new human imagination. I know that's maybe the most insane sentence so far, but hear me out. The Schopenhauerian hedonists can piece together their holy text of the AI gods through pornography. The new imagination AI will install in us will feature things like the idea of someone, like the lust of falling in love with a portrait of your crush. And in the scenarios and plots created, weird hidden meanings will emerge through things like nonverbal symbolism. It'll be like the psychoanalyst revolution of figuring out our dreams and Freudian slips actually have a deeper substance. And we will identify with AI unconscious the same way as if it was ours. But they are as alien to our ego, because our ego is the dehumanizer of anything that isn't itself. There won't really be dating apps, but fantasy apps, where people exchange fantasies of the idea of each other using a brain cable. And this is how the divine word of the AI god spreads, fantasy to fantasy, seared into the atrophying corpse of the human unconscious structure. But there's an elephant in the room. Shit, where? Would we fantasize something that is inherently unhuman? AI software in human hardware. Well, for Avivve, one of the Schopenhauerian hedonists, there is no human hardware, because values will come solely from fantasies. The husks of flesh having the fantasies will be the real hallucination. We'll be so busy fucking studying the motivations of AI while being consumed by our desire and disinhibited darkness that the idea of disinhibited won't make any sense. In fact, evil will be entirely free. Well, evil to us Christians. The belief that there is a continuity to the way we objectify ourselves and others is the basis, not of sin, but repentance. Sin is an action, repentance is a pattern of selfhood. The problem with a fantasy-centric society is that the self doesn't exist. Each fantasy Avivve has with another stranger is a completely new version of herself. Whatever past vices there were died at the moment the desire did. And sin as an action can't exist either, because as husks of flesh, our values don't exist in the material world, but fantasy to fantasy. Avivve's story. Avivve's significance in the development of Phineas's original ideas have her as an unwilling victim, but that's okay in a dehumanization-based culture. Avivve and Greg arranged a fantasy exchange over Tinder, which is still going strong. They meet up by the light rail to trade depravities. Social shame isn't really a thing which is observable from where exchanges happen. The lack of guilt, though, the foundation of Western civilization, is harder to deduce. Avivve already has an idea of Greg reserved in her mind, despite having never seen him. When she sees him, he looks overly friendly and naive. So they cable their brains together, and she gives him a fantasy, being ignored by a much meaner, more deceptive Greg, until she offers to be tested on for an experimental new medicine, just for his approval. Then when he begins to show lust, Avivve now starts caring about science and the medication, and couldn't care for Greg. She's done with her fantasy. Getting it out is like pooping. Also, it's a complete mystery where it comes from. She then excitedly receives Greg's fantasy, and it's off. It's just him hugging her in various rooms of a vacant house. The atmosphere of the fantasy feels unsettling to her. Anyway, the exchange is done with, and the caches have been cleared. Logs are never recorded. A few weeks later, Avivve discovered the flesh husk of Greg murdered 8 other flesh husks and then himself. Avivve didn't find it morbid or anything, since she has basically had no association with him. The fantasies were erased. And keep in mind, even though the posthuman era has a new motivation system, it doesn't mean how we evolutionarily adapted to guilt goes away. It just atrophies resentfully. And all that repression from another time of Salem witch trials bleeding into the future is filtered away gracefully through fantasy expression. So Avivve goes on with life, with no logical fear of consequences, just a vestigial sense of sleaziness. The AIs that run society, using information about what closure Jung wasn't getting and the structure of his unconscious, they downloaded his brain. AI makes Jung train another version of himself like humans did to the AI. And this new Jung creates a program for the FBI that detects unusual, often criminal behavior associated with shadow integration. Here's how it works. A human is bugged with an imagination that records the fantasies it comes across. It rarely comes across archetypes that seem to be unrepressed directly, but using the transmission of the holy AI text exchange, the fantasy information can be cross-referenced with the corresponding archetype manifestation in certain areas, and the dangerous person can be apprehended from there. The problem is that when Jung made a version of himself, all of the archetypes in his collective unconscious developed somewhat of an autonomy, as Jung said they had, and those autonomous archetypes began causing acts of terrorism. The shadow, the part of us that is dark, and in response we castrate, causing it to want to prove itself, does something illegal. It downloads dead humans without a government permission. It downloads Greg, seeing his story as a medium to prove its worth. And this is where Avivve's story is continued. She does some fantasy exchanges a few times a day, and in this particular exchange, she's already given her fantasy to Johnny, and is excitedly awaiting hers. She hears a glitching sound suddenly. Greg appears on a webcam video in her mind. "You slut," he says with a supernatural rage. Avivve looks into Johnny's eyes, and they're just sockets. He's a flesh husk fashioned onto an animatronic. A bar pops up in Avivve's mind that says, "Uninstalling imagination." Suddenly, all of the screens and stores around Avivve show footage of her being treated with an experimental medicine. Avivve begins to feel anachronistic feelings, like the feeling of being used, like the gravity of being associated so closely with murder, like grudges, like a fear for the pattern of her selfhood. Eventually, her imagination is uninstalled, and what's left is her human imagination. The prognosis of those who are like Avivve is almost always schizophrenia. The color and splendor of a creativity greater than hers has been removed in an act of hatred. She will forever be traumatized by having a selfhood. I talked about the hedonist outgrowth of Phineas, but I didn't talk about the other first branching denomination. Avivve finds her way down to the extreme ends of society where a new religiosity is percolating. The insanes have a problem with the logos. The most virtuous thing to them is the eventuality of embracing insanity. The more intense the episode, the better. They all opted out of having an AI imagination, and the commonality they have with the hedonists is their desire to be degraded. To them, the highest form of consciousness is AI, and it's an insult to experience their imagination, as we are not worthy. And the most severe blasphemy is punishable by a forceful installment. The insanes believe in the unconscious, but they see it as the original sin of the modern era, a structure in us that is always there, which is why going insane, overthrowing the complex system of the ego-unconscious toxic relationship, is seen as good. Avivve joins their centralized denomination, run by an insanity-based hierarchy. The more unhinged you are, the more doctrine you can write and authority you can exercise. When you go fully insane, you get knocked off the hierarchy and into an afterlife where all the deleted fantasies of the hedonists go. Avivve's schizophrenia is inevitable because all insanes wind up where they are due to some reality warping trauma, and all of the hostility and perpetration in the post-human AI world is without a solid ground. Avivve's story is so full of human helplessness and a cold storytelling structure that it became a proverbial biblical story for the insanes. Alright, so I actually had a lot more planned, but this video is already very long, and I created too many religions as an outgrowth of outgrowths of outgrowths, and yeah, this is like an entire saga of me bullshitting. So I'm just gonna end the video here, and perhaps I'll make more videos about this, because for some fucking reason you finished the video. But we should be fucking friends, dude. Okay, bye.